Thank you very much, Ankur. Very good morning, afternoon, evening, night to all our participants because they're located at different parts of the world. And it's wonderful to see everyone here. And we have two very inspiring speakers with us here, Professor Anil Chima and Dr. Reiki Singh. And we will, Dr. Chima is the Director, Division of Health and Human Performance and Stanford Flourishing Project, Stanford University, USA. And Dr. Satinder Singh Reiki is the CEO, R Systems, and Honorary Chairman of Reiki Center of Excellence for the Science of Happiness, IIT Kharagpur. So they will be speaking respectively on the future of flourishing and on the rhythm in stillness, respectively. And at the outset here, it's my honor to introduce you to Dr. Chima. So let me quickly do that and then hand over the presentation to Dr. Chima. Anil Chima, apart from leading the Stanford Flourishing Project, is PhD, also co-founder of and co-chair of the Wellbeing, Innovation and Social Change in Education Network, a global movement of higher education social innovation program at 100 universities, and co-convenes the Flourishing Academic Network, a consortium of centers and research institutes at top universities across North America, focusing on reinventing higher education as a force for global thriving. His teaching and scholarship engages the question, how can we innovate ways to scale individual and collective flourishing in an emerging future defined by exponential change and human technology convergence? His work applies insights from the emerging science and art well-being alongside the tools of design thinking and systems change to scale positive transformation. His work has been published in the Harvard Business Review, Stanford Social Innovation Review, and other distinguished journals. And Anil, in the sphere of business, spent over 10 years as co-founder and managing partner at The Core, a consortium of firms that enhance the innovation and performance of leading global organizations. He has many other qualifications, but I would not like to stand between you and Anil. I'd just like to end this brief introduction by saying that Anil is passionate about using psychological insights to affect sustainable social change and prioritize non-profit work. He is also strongly influenced by Buddhist philosophy and Buddhism. So over to Anil. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And many thanks to all the organizers of the Rhythm of Happiness conference. I just want to double check. Did I hear that the ideal is to have about 10 to 15 minutes of talk and then
No. It's 30 minutes of talk followed by 10 minutes of discussion.
Okay, perfect. Good. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, wonderful. So, yeah, thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Wonderful to connect with you. Some of you are friends and colleagues that I know. Others are people I'm getting to know. And I hope by the end of today, you'll have a better sense of what I'm about and what my work is about, and also what I'm hoping to do to support in the world. And I thought about this title of this conference, The Rhythm of Happiness, and it's particularly salient to my work because much of what I'm interested in is what is the future of flourishing in society and the world in the midst of what I often call 3D change that is perpetual, it's ongoing and unrelenting, change that is pervasive, it's in multiple domains of life at once. And change that is exponential. It's accelerating at an accelerating rate. And so there's something very apt about the title of this conference as it relates to the future of flourishing, because the rhythms of living are changing dramatically. Even before the last 2 years, where we have been faced with this international challenge and tragedy in some cases of the COVID pandemic. there were for years evolving the forces of three-dimensional change. And one of these forces, I think, is rooted in what my collaborators and I call convergence, that complex technology is coming together more and more and converging into things like this, right? This amazing device that combines things that it took 5, 7, 8, 10 different devices or applications or modes to do what is embedded in this one thing. So more and more is converging within the same technology. But even more than that, the technology experience, how we think and feel, how we cognize, is integrating and being influenced by that very technology that's converging more and more. In fact, if you could measure the amount of information that you and I input every day, compare it to 2 generations ago, we input every day an order of magnitude, 10x, what our grandparents would have inputted. That's amazing. That is a profound change in rhythm, right? It's a profound change in rhythm of the inputting of information. It's a profound change in the rhythm of cognition, how we think, feel, perceive, sense make. And so the future of flourishing has to accommodate these 2 fundamental forces of three-dimensional change and of convergence, because these forces are shaping our brain-body systems in ways that are unprecedented in the history of being human, in the history of our species. And so my discussion today is going to take on some of these themes and ask and perhaps investigate, how might we flourish in the future starting now? How might we see that emerging future? And what are some of the methods that we want to utilize to maximize flourishing for all? And so I'd like to start with a simple but profound question. And here I'll share my screen so that we can go into the formal part of the talk. I want to ask you this question. What is the future of human flourishing? If I were to ask you that question, how might you answer it? And I just want you to think about it. Contemplate this for a moment. What's the future of human flourishing? If we think about what is flourishing, if it's the emergence and blossoming of our full potential, if it is connected to emotional elements, the ability to generate and experience positive emotion, if it's connected to psychological elements of meaning making and purpose doing, if it's connected to social elements of relationships and communities and belonging, if it's connected to contemplative elements like awareness, attention, deep reflection, transcendence, what does flourishing look like in this new future? And more pointedly, as the rhythms of living change fundamentally because of three-dimensional change, again, change that is perpetual, ongoing, unrelenting, change that is pervasive in multiple domains of life at once, and change that is exponential, increasingly increasing its rate of change. And this world of convergence, where technology is becoming more and more converged, and human cognition is becoming more and more merged with technology. Simple example, when's the last time you ever drove somewhere new without using GPS? In fact, I use it to go to familiar places. I can't even remember some of the places I used to know where I went without the aid of this computer. Or think about your 10 closest friends, family. How many of their phone numbers do you know? I polled my students, and I get about 5 to 10% know 10 of their closest friends and family's phone numbers. What's changing? These are simple examples. We aren't even looking at questions that are much more exotic, like human augmented cognition, neurolacing, way down the future, or even augmented reality and virtual reality. Just basic questions of memorizing the basic ways to connect with the people closest to us. Even that has shifted. So something is happening in the rhythms of living that's changing how we cognize, how we think, feel, perceive, and sense make. And so I want to back up to look at the long sweep of evolution. And I want to conceptualize this in that long sweep of evolution and ask what's going on to our brain-body systems. And so one simple way to conceptualize this is to imagine that you put the brain in the palm of your hand. So you can do this with me if you would. I think it's quite useful if we do this together. So just put your hand out in front of you and tap your palm. You've now made your brain stem. This is where respiration and heart rate happens. We don't even have to think about it. It keeps us alive. Fold in your thumb. This is now your limbic system, your amygdala. Staying alive, right? Survival, fight or flight. Wiggle your fingers. This is your flexible mind, your cortex folded over. Right behind your fingernails is your prefrontal cortex. This is the so-called Triune model of the brain. It's oversimplified, but it's good enough. It's good enough for an approximation. So if we have this brain and it's embedded in our bodies, when we encounter change that we can't anticipate, that's novel or surprising, or change that we don't have much influence over, or a sudden experience where we say, uh-oh, I might be in danger here, what happens? Our lid flips. We go into what's sometimes called limbic system hijack, and our cortical structure is compromised significantly. This is the exquisite function of our evolutionary adaptation to perceive and react to threat. In a tenth of a second, our limbic system is activated. Pupil dilation, adrenaline and cortisol is dropped into our system, muscle tension, and so on. This helps us scan for threat, perceive it, and react by freezing, by running, by fighting, right? And this is our threat detection mechanism. It has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, and it is exquisite. The challenges, the pace of change of society has far, far outpaced the pace of change of our biology. And so what we have, as I tell my students here in Silicon Valley, we have stone-aged brains in Silicon Valley realities. So the mechanisms of fight or flight activation were meant for mortal threat, to stay alive, right? But this same mechanism is activated in our everyday lives when we receive a text message that reminds us of a deadline that's upcoming, or something that is unkind in our email inbox or on Slack, right? The same mechanisms start to enact. And further, let's go one step further. Because we have evolved to exquisitely perceive threat, we over-perceive threat and under-perceive safety. Or you could say we over-perceive the negative and under-perceive the positive because it has an evolutionarily adaptive value. Imagine that you're walking out in nature and a bush shakes. And you miss it completely, and out jumps a lion or a tiger, right? And you're eaten for lunch. That's a high cost relative to those who a bush shakes, they immediately see it and they jump back and out pops a bunny rabbit. And they may feel a little silly and they overreacted, but guess what? The overreaction is adaptive. It keeps you alive. And so the residue of this with our Stone Age brains in our modern day realities is that we have inbuilt or have been selected for a negative cognitive bias. And further, when the rhythms of society have accelerated because of 3D change and convergence, our brain-body system is flipping its lid all the time, and going into fight or flight, faint or freeze, going into threat perception, much more than is necessary and much more than is adaptive, and it's taking a toll on our happiness and well-being. And so if I were to visualize this, I often say that the state of our lid flipped, limbic system hijack, is like this: cognitive tunnel vision, where we have lost choice and are in a state of reactivity. This is not a state of creating new behaviors. It's not a state of innovation. It's quite literally the opposite. And so the very capacities that are needed most in an emerging, complex, multi-layered future are being compromised by the nature of the rhythms of this emerging future. We instead need to learn how to individually and collectively put our lids back on so that we have access to a wide cognitive vista and more choice, proactivity, flexibility, adaptability, creativity, right? And so the question becomes, what's the doorway in? How do we step into the emerging future in a way that gives us more of this and less of this? Right? That's the question for me about the future of flourishing. Less of this, more of this, more wide cognitive vista. So then again, what's the doorway in? How do we get there? And so I want to go back to the self, this brain-body system with a mind, and reimagine it. We need to think of the self not as a discrete, standalone entity untouched by the world out there. Instead, we need to think about the self as a mind, brain, body system, a system of systems inside of us, in relationship with technological, social, cultural, ecological systems out there, such that if we look at this image, that the self is not discrete. In fact, it's permeable. That what goes on in here in my brain, body, mind system influences fundamentally how I interpret and sense make what's going on out there. And what's going on out there doesn't stay in the outer world, but in fact, profoundly influences what states of my mind and brain and body are activated. Am I in fight or flight, or am I in that wide cognitive vista? And that these layers of social systems, our relational networks, cultural systems, the rituals and values that we move through day to day, the ecological, natural world, the technological, the built world, that these systems profoundly influence our mind, brain, and body, and therefore can profoundly influence how we cognize, how we perceive, feel, think, and sense make. And so to think about the future of flourishing, to think about the future of flourishing with the rhythms of our social, cultural, and ecological world, our technological world changing we've got to zoom in on cognition, and we need to reinvent how we think about cognition. And so in certain subfields of cognitive neuroscience and the science and philosophy of mind, a field of cognition called 4E has arisen. One of its champions is Evan Thompson, famously of Thompson and Varela, the late Francisco Varela. He and Francisco Varela forwarded one of the dominant paradigms of studying the brain-body system called neurophenomenology. The idea that we looked at the neurology, third-person objective brain states using fMRI or EEG, and we intersect them with first-person subjective ways, phenomenologies of experience. And this is what the contemplative traditions do incredibly well. The contemplative traditions have profoundly high fidelity, deep mappings of the phenomenology, the subjective landscape and experience of human experience and consciousness. And so this led to an explosion of findings in neurophenomenology, the neurocorrelates of consciousness. It seems like the brain structure here is connected to this kind of attention, and the brain structure here to this kind of awareness and compassion and so on. So many interesting insights have flowed forward from that. And that was sort of articulated in this current form in the 90s and has been a dominant force for the last 20-something years. But Thompson and others are forwarding a deeper paradigm, which is 4E, right? This idea that cognition is embodied. We're not just a brain on the stick or a brain in the vat, as people used to say. We are brain-body systems. What happens in our cardiothoracic system, what happens in our gastroenterological system, our digestion, in our heart and breathing, profoundly impacts how our central nervous system activates and how we cognize. We are embedded, the second E, we are embedded, as we mentioned, in social, cultural, ecological, technological systems. We are extended. This technology extends our cognition, even from the paper and pencil or the papyrus and the ink. We have extended our technologies, and our capability to extend cognition through technology has amplified more and more and more and will continue to exponentially. And the 4D it's inactive. It's not just some static state, but how we participate within ourselves and in the world dynamically changes our cognition. So 4E, embodied, embedded, extended, and active. And so if we take that seriously, and we ask this question, what is human flourishing from an embedded, right, embodied, in extended and active view, then we have to look at all these domains of what's going on inside of our brain-body systems, what's going on out there and how can we adapt, shape, and select, what's going on individually on the unit of analysis of the individual, but what's also going on collectively, relationally between two people and in communities and groups. And that all of these domains of analysis have profound implications for our biorhythms, for our cultural and social rhythms, and therefore for the future rhythms of happiness and flourishing. And we need to get outside of the unit of analysis solely the individual. It's outmoded. It doesn't capture the richness of what the future of flourishing is, where we live in a world of three-dimensional change and convergence, where these rhythms are changing rapidly and profoundly changing how we cognize. And so if we go a little deeper and ask, what is flourishing? Let me give a simple model to think of it through. 4 factors. I alluded to them earlier. 1 is emotional, the ability to generate and savor positive emotions, happiness, joy, satisfaction, and so on. I love this image, both of these images. The second is psychological. I mentioned the ability to make meaning. In fact, one of the core defining elements of being human is storytelling. Telling stories to ourselves and other people, about ourselves, other people, and the world. We make meaning through narrative and story. And then also purpose. The enactment of meaning in the world, in our building and making, in our creation of technology, everything from the plow to the iPhone to beyond, right? We make things, we make tools, and we make civilizations. And the making purpose-based element, the fact that I matter, that I have a place in this world, these are the psychological pieces. The social, the relational, loving, mutual relationships, which is connected to but distinct from the communal. I belong to something bigger than myself. Right? And then the contemplative. I think one of the things that has been stolen from us in this modern age through behavioral addiction to tech, through the changing rhythms of our culture. And when I say contemplative, I mean attention, the ability to pay attention for a sustained time to one thing. Awareness, to have wide vistas of awareness, inner and outer. Reflection, the ability to ponder deeply over extended time. And transcendence, curiosity, awe, wonder, and transcendence, to be able to experience something more than the self. And so if these are the fundaments of well-being and flourishing, how do we enact them in our emerging future? Well, I think we've got to look at this question of how our future, our emerging future, is disrupting our now. The way we make meaning, the way we enact purpose is changing. And our biology is not going to keep up. So our cultural formations have to shift to accommodate the ever-increasing difference between how culture and technology is evolving and how human biology is evolving. Because the rate of change of culture and technology is exponential and human biology is slow, the difference between the two is ever increasing. And so since I have sort of a Buddhist sensibility, I use this image to ask a question, right? If our systems of deepest meaning making, whatever they might be, religious, spiritual, philosophical, our systems of deepest meaning making and purpose seeking are being disrupted, how can we update them while retaining their essences? What does ancient wisdom in a contemporary context look like? I think this is one of the challenges we have to take on vibrantly. I call this the disruption paradox. And I want to assert that in order to take on the challenge posed by the emerging future that we're living in, that the art and science of well-being, yes, that's a core element. That the understanding and practice of contemplation, yes, that's a core element as well. But these on their own are not sufficient. They may be useful for individual flourishing here and there, but in the face of 3D change and convergence, I believe they are insufficient. And if we are going to scale flourishing in an inclusive way that retains its authenticity, depth, and responds to this cultural moment and its diversity of needs, if we are to rise to the challenge of this disruption paradox, we must have the catalyst of social innovation firmly present. And what I mean by social innovation is social change, leadership, and entrepreneurial ethos, the use the creation and use of transformative technologies, right? The way to flourishing for all, individual and collective flourishing, I believe, is at the heart of these three overlapping circles: the art and science of well-being, the reclamation of contemplation, and the application of social innovation. Only with those three can we find our way into this emerging future well. I'll further say that I think we all need to be designers. We all need to adopt a kind of design thinking, design ethos, kind of redesigning the designers, remaking the makers. How can we go beyond our usual assumptions and methods? And this is the 5-factor model of design thinking at the D School here at Stanford. Many other global design firms use something similar. But I really think this idea of adopting sort of the design thinking and ethos of a designer is essential. We need to iterate, right? Iterate. We need to go through this design cycle from the inside out to really understand what is it we need to solve for deeply in a certain context, and how can we prototype and test what we generate to continually refine it. And then the second paradox that I want to point out is the transformation paradox. We need designers and makers envisioning and creating transformative technologies that enhance human connection and flourishing from a transformed place. We need to sort of reach into the future, into the best of the future, and pull from it into the present, and imbue in the technologies we create, in the systems that we create, the future we need to create in order to flourish. And I often like to cite, along with many, many others, this famous Einstein quote: "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." This is part of the disruption paradox. The way I like to re-articulate is we can't solve problems using the same kind of cognition and consciousness we used when we created them. We need more. And I'll end by saying this, and I'll just put this slide out there so you can continue the conversation via email. And this is something I wrote about in my last article for Harvard Business Review, because I really believe this to be the essential future. The age of the individual as the solo hero, the age of the leader as the hero, solo, certain, is over. Gone are the days where one single super genius can understand all possible pathways forward and plot that course with certainty. No. Will we have heroes and heroines? Of course we will. But they will create the future through collective capacity building. And I cite the metaphor of the compound eye. Think of the compound eye or mosaic vision like insects have. Each receptor capturing part of the whole, and only together, composed and integrated, can we see the full picture. So I believe that the future of flourishing, in the rhythms that we live in now and into the future, necessitate that we have this collective capacity building to sense, make, and flourish together in the systems we build, in the relationships we construct, and in the communities that we live in. So I will pause there and open for questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chima, for again a beautiful talk, the second one that we are listening to. And I'll just quickly make a few comments and then open it up for discussion. While listening to your talk, I was reminded of two things. One, Alvin Toffler's Future Shock which anticipated excessively rapid technological changes, and raised the question of how human beings would respond to them. And the other one is a fiction by George Louis Borges, The Book of Sand, the story of an infinite library. And we realize that the internet is a kind of a prototype of that infinite library. And while it was an open-ended question for Borges, how one would navigate in an infinite space, we realize today that classification, categorization, and these search engines kind of resolve to a certain extent and manage to articulate things. In the same way, Professor Chima's questions about rapid technology change is followed by a possible solution as well, which is beautiful. And it is for time to tell us how these and other such solutions will actually take us through these difficult times, especially revisiting our past traditions, especially Buddhism, to see and find a solution to that. So thank you, Professor Chima, for the wonderful insights that you shared with us, the problem as well as the possible solutions. Now it's open to questions. Questions, if they're in the type form, can be read out by Ankur, or questions can also be raised by using the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Since first question is by me itself, so I guess I can ask that in person. So first of all, thank you, sir, for such wonderful talk. Actually, during the whole talk, I had, questions were coming in my mind, and then they were, explained later automatically by like your further talk. So, but still, just wanted to know, is there a need to update the old benchmarks of success, enjoyment, or even societal acceptance to be revised from an individual's perspective if one wants to flourish better? Thank you.
Oh, I think that's an interesting question. I think paradoxically, on the one hand, humans as a species are pretty much the same as we were, 100,000 years ago, certainly 100 years ago. We're, essentially identical as a species, sort of biologically speaking. So one might argue from one perspective, the fundamental needs of being human are the same, right? Which is we need to have good nutrition, we need to move our bodies, we need rest, we need safety, then we need connection, we need some meaning and purpose. These are fundamental. So in that regard, some of these things have not changed. However, the container that holds the cognizing human has evolved. The cultural container, the technological container, and so that which is modulating the organism, the species, has changed quite a bit. And so I think we need to think then paradoxically at the same time that we have to update the how of these fundamental whats. Right? If the what is we still need social connection, how we have social connection in these changing rhythms may be different. Look at the implications of social media, good and bad, as one example. Right? It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it affords certain capabilities to connect across time and space, like we are here with the Zoom. On the other, it can also paradoxically increase isolation and social comparison and so on. And so the what of human well-being and flourishing may fundamentally be stable along certain domains, although, there might be emergent properties around that what. The how is certainly changing rapidly. And so I think it's a paradox of holding that which is intrinsic to being human and that which is changing in the shape and affordances of new cultural formations.
Thank you very much. So next question is from Gokul Muthu. The 20th century saw a movement towards individual and extroversion. From what you say, we seem to be going back to connectedness and introversion. Do you see a flipping from society for the individual of liberalism back to individual for the society of collectivism?
I think we need to see a rebalancing. If we were to sketch, two domains in space, like an x-axis and a y-axis, on the one hand, we have, let's say the individual and the collective. And then on the other axis, you have the interior and the exterior. And I think we have to inhabit all four. the individual needs to go inward as well as create and engage outward. These are both necessary. And the collective has an interiority and an exteriority. Think of a team. I actually think one of the most profound units of change is the group, the small group, let's say anywhere from 3 to 20 or something. That this group has an interiority. They have an ethos, a value set, a shared mores and rituals. And then they have an exteriority, that which they do out in the world. And so I would say it's not a flipping, but it should be, I think, an integration, right? Of individual to collective, interior to exteriority. And then if I were to add a z-axis here, it would be from languishing to flourishing. So orienting the individual and collectives in their inner experiences and outer experiences towards flourishing. A rebalancing, shall we say. Great questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anilji. I think we will, since you have shared your email ID, I'm sure that a lot of other intriguing thoughts and reflections of our participants would go to you in the form of email questions. We definitely do look forward to that. Right now, it has been a very, very insightful talk, and we look forward to the next talk by Dr. Satinder Singh Reiki, whom I would like to briefly introduce along with the theme that he would be talking about. The job of introducing Reiki sir has two parts to it. A personal part in the sense that we met him for the first time 5.5 years back, and we had a series of interactions. And this interaction has taught us at a personal level what kind of a human being he is and what kind of a person he is. So I would say at a personal level, almost all of us at the Reiki Center have learned a lot from Reiki sir, especially in terms of humility as well as positivity. On the other hand, a brief introduction for the audience here who do not know Dr. Reiki is also required. So I will make that brief introduction over here. Dr. Reiki is the CEO of our systems, an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur, and currently the honorary chairman of our Reiki Center of Excellence for the Science of Happiness at IIT Kharagpur. He is the founder of our systems, which came into existence in 1993, has over 35 years of experience, and is one of the leading figures in the information technology industry. Prior to joining our systems, he held senior management positions with HCL Technologies, DISC, now Synergics, in the United States, Singapore, and India. He completed Master of Business Administration from California State University, Sacramento, and attended several senior management programs from the University of Berkeley, Harvard Business School. Dr. Reiki graduated from the IIT Kharagpur, India, with a bachelor's degree in technology. He recently sponsored a new center at his alma mater, that is us, and he has also introduced a number of other centers around the country in many distinguished universities. Presently, he is also has a Reiki Foundation which deals primarily and focuses on happiness. So I will not stand between you and Reiki sir, and I will quickly introduce the beautiful title of his talk, which is Rhythm in Stillness. Over to Reiki sir for his talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Pio. Thank you very much. You always make me feel so good with your introduction. And I want to thank Anil for such a wonderful presentation. I don't know if he's still there, but there's so much of learning every time we hear Anil. So I'm going to start my talk and I'll share my screen. Is my screen shared now or not?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, you may need to reshare it again. Sometimes there is an issue.
Okay. So I stop share.
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes, sir. We are able to see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anil talked about the brain and the various how it has evolved, and he talked about the threats that it went through, and the evolution it went through. We live in two worlds: a world of stress, a lot of chatter which the brain creates, a world of fear, evolution-wise, and a world of stillness. There is so much noise in the brain. In noise, there is no stillness. In noise, there is no rhythm. There is stillness when there is silence. That's beyond the chatter and the noise of the brain, beyond the thinking brain. Beyond the mental activity, there is your essential nature is there, which is nature of quietude, calm, inspiration, and positive energy. But why are we unaware of this stillness? We don't know, because we are so much lost in this noise. I want to talk about this Musk Deer. You must have heard of it. This is a beautiful animal found in the Himalayas between Kashmir and Nepal. And this male Musk Deer has a beautiful fragrance which comes from a bag, a musk, which is there between the navel region and the rectal region. And that is also called kasturi in India. Deer loves this scent, but does not know where it comes from. It goes from one cliff to another cliff, from one place to another place, looking for the source of the truth, the source of the fragrance. He looks outside. He never finds it. It's a sad story. He dies, but he never knows where that scent comes from. Are we the musk deers in search of our own scent and are looking everywhere and not able to find it? So today's topic that we are going to talk about is the world of noise. Anil has talked a fair amount about that world of noise, the world of stillness, and then the rhythm in stillness. Let's enter the world of noise. In the earlier session, we heard about the brain. There'll be some repetition here, that the brain was built on threat. We had physical threats, then we had social threats, and our noise that we have is filled with thoughts and emotions. When we lived in the caves, Anil mentioned something like this. Our aim was to find lunch, food. Our aim was not to become lunch for someone else. There were predators, animals roaming around, and the brain got used to sending out stress chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, so that we panicked and ran or fought and survived. The brain did a good job. We have survived till today. You are the elite descendants of ancestors who felt stress. The ancestors who did not feel stress did not make it. They're no longer there. But another thing happened when the physical threat came about. You got awareness, super awareness of the danger. You focused on the threat and you took care of yourself. So the brain has developed with creating threat signals to you because brain wants you to survive. When we got out of the caves, the digital world, it was social stress. And we talked about an email. The email from a boss who says that you've not done a good work could send you into heavy social stress, and your mind could start creating more thinking, more thoughts. And again, the cortisol builds up. The same stress that we felt during physical danger times, we start feeling with social stress. But in social stress, something else different happened. In the physical stress, we got super aware, focused on the danger. In the social stress, we got distracted. Our minds went here and there, to the past, to the future. A simple thing, we started doing, what if that would happen? Will I get fired? Will I lose my job? And all sorts of thoughts started coming in. So David Rock has analyzed the social stress and said that we feel social stress either when we lose status. We want to be equivalent to everybody else. If you see somebody else having a higher status, the brain thinks you're not going to survive and sends you the stress chemicals. We want certainty. We want to know what's going to happen in the future. Anytime the brain sees uncertainty, it sends those stress hormones, and you feel fear and panic. We want autonomy. We want to be in control. When I'm driving this car of life, I want to know. I want to be in control. Anytime you lose autonomy or control, stress happens. And we are so addicted to fairness. We expect fairness. The world must be fair to me. If I'm in a grocery line, if somebody cuts me off unfair, I feel stressed. I get angry. I'm driving on the freeway, somebody cuts me off, I get stress hormones. And another thing which causes us stress is relationships. If relationships don't work out, we feel really stressed. And it has been found that a heartbreak hurts more than a broken bone, and in the same area of the brain. And even so, that with physical pain, if you ate a pain reliever like Tylenol or aspirin or whatever, that pain reduces. Even with the social stress, those pain relievers work. Now, these social stresses create emotions, anger, fear, panic. Biologically, this emotion should last only 90 seconds. When we had the physical stress, we ran, we fought, we burnt out those chemicals. But now, with our sedentary lifestyle, these build up. And that gives us a hard time. And why do these emotions not die out? Or why these stress chemicals don't get finished off? And the only reason is that when we get an emotion, thoughts keep them alive. Emotions and thoughts are bidirectional. You get a fear, anger emotion, thoughts come in, and you create more thoughts, and more thoughts create more emotions. We ruminate. What if this happened? What if that happened? Why did he do this to me? And we go into this rumination and create more and more emotions through more and more thoughts. That is the noise we have in our head. That noise keeps us obsessed, and we do not see the stillness. Stillness is behind all of this, and let's enter the world of stillness. Here I'm going to talk about a few things which help enter the world of stillness, awareness. I think Anil also talked about awareness. We'll talk about pitbull thoughts. We'll talk about grounding yourself and then going with the flow. If you have a fridge in your house, it's making a lot of noise. It is da. Since it's in your house, every day the noise is there, you don't notice it. It becomes a part of your life and you're not even aware that the fridge is making that much noise. One day, the power goes away. There is silence. You get aware of that silence. You notice that silence. When you notice that silence, thinking stops. When you notice external silence, inner silence is created. When you hear the sound of silence, a new dimension of stillness through silence is created in you. Because you're not thinking at that time. You are present. You are aware. Awareness is the first step to stillness. The place of quietude, the place of calmness, the place of inspiration, the place of positive energy. It is there behind all of the noise. And as I said, you get present, and this stillness lies behind mental activity. Let me talk about awareness a little bit. That's a very important part. That is the door to stillness. In a class, the teacher is talking, giving a lecture. The student has some thoughts about a party he's going to have at night or some other problem he has. The thoughts take him away. He is actually now absent in the class. If he becomes aware that his thoughts have drifted, his mind is wandering, he becomes present. Awareness of the mind wandering brings you into present. And that awareness and the stillness is a state of no mind, meaning no thought. There are times where there are no thoughts. I don't know if people notice it, but say we get multiple thoughts. One thought comes, then the next thought comes. Between the two thoughts, there's a gap. There's a pause. If we notice that, that is the door to stillness. If we notice that pause, that gap between the two thoughts, that pause becomes bigger. Right now, when we don't notice it, that moment of pause, a gap between the two thoughts or multiple thoughts is zero. But when you notice it, it may be very small at one time, but it becomes bigger and bigger.
18 years
It's a state, stillness and awareness takes you to total presence. You're walking on a street, a pit bull dog attacks you. You can't run. He's too fast for you. You can't fight. He's too strong for you. He grabs your leg. What do? You do a helpless dance to shake off the animal. The more you do the helpless dance, the more he grips. He grips harder. What could you do? Be still. If you stay still, the animal might leave you. That is the same problem we have with pit bull thoughts. Thoughts attack us. These are thoughts of judgment, thoughts of shame. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not thin enough. You're not intelligent enough. Thoughts of complaining. I did not get a good deal. Thoughts of blaming people. All judgment thoughts are pit bull thoughts because you get attached to them and they don't leave you. Worrying thoughts are also pit bull thoughts because we somehow feel that the more we worry, our problem will go away. And then we ruminate and ruminate and ruminate. If we go behind those thoughts, that's where stillness is. If you don't engage with these thoughts, you start noticing them, there is awareness, you will see some signs of stillness. So there are 3 levels of thoughts. We are in number 2. We are trapped in thought. A tree, a rock, nature is below thought. Of course, the tree is in stillness, but it is below thought. Connecting to a tree helps, but we can't go back to the tree. We remain trapped in the thought. Our evolution now is to go above thought, transcend thought. And 90% of our thoughts are useless. Where do they come from? Why do they come to us? We never know. Again, space between the thoughts is what we need. And we have got so good at thinking or thoughting, we need to get good at not thinking. And that can only happen if we transcend the thoughts, above thoughts. We need to ground ourselves. We have anxious brains, as we have said. They need grounding. I'm an electrical engineer. When we design or install electric circuitry, we run a ground wire that goes into the earth, because any surface which is exposed then gets grounded and you do not get a shock. Our brain draws so much of energy from the body, probably 80 to 90% of all the energy created by your food is consumed by the brain, and it goes up all the way up on top, and it creates anxiety. We need to ground this brain. And the way to do is to connect it with trees, with nature. And we are today disconnected from our beautiful earth that we love and live on. And that's because the brain is filled with so much of chatters, so much of anxiety energy, and we need to ground it like we ground the electric circuitry. I don't know if any of you must have seen this on a video or a picture, Wall Street floor. These people are not grounded. There is so much of agitation, so much of irritability, so much of frustration. Minute to minute, they're running up and down. And here, these beautiful girls in a tea garden, they are grounded. I'm not saying that everybody must work in a tea garden, but I want you to be aware that the brain needs grounding and nature helps in that grounding. Research has shown there's benefits of being in nature, in and around trees. Trees have a vibration which if you connect to, if you can hug the tree, that is wonderful. If you even connect or be aware of the tree when you're on nature walk, that helps. Remember, the tree is in stillness. And when you connect to a tree which is in stillness, something happens to you. Science has shown that when you hug a tree, it's like hugging another person, and oxytocin is released, which is the love hormone, which reduces stress. Most important thing is going with the flow. Have any one of you wondered at some time in your lives, you work hard, you do things, but nothing fruitful happens. You get failure after failure. You do the things so well, but they don't get to a successful conclusion. And if that happens to you, you are probably not going with the flow. Laozi, the founder of Taoism, says that everything is in a natural flow. There is a flow in nature, in the universe, in your lives. There's a natural flow. And you need to tune into that flow. Guru Nanak calls this flow hukam, divine will. And he says, there's a timing to everything. Your job is to accept. Now, of course, how do we figure out this flow? That is a very big challenge. Let me give you a further example of how this flow is. There's a river here. Let's call this the metaphorical river of life. That's just not a river of life, a metaphorical river of life. And this man is working against this flow of the river, the metaphorical river of life. He's going to get tired. He's probably not going to reach his destination. Why is he going against the flow? Because he sees a destination, a visible destination. So he goes against the flow towards the visible destination. But the problem is he misses out that there is a greater destination towards the flow, which is not visible, but which is only available when you go with the flow. So for starters, to go with the flow, we have to let go of the destination. We have to go beyond the rational mind into the still mind. There will be some hints of the flow of life which Laozi and Guru Nanak are talking about. Does stillness make you numb? Is it something very passive? No. If you've seen a kid's top, it spins so fast. And it seems to be motionless because it's spinning so fast. It's perfectly centered and it's in kind of a balance. There's a lot of energy there. Our lives are unbalanced. We tip to the left, then to the right. We are not centered. We are here and we are there. We are conflicted in the brain. All our energies are not focused on one activity. We are multitasking. We are not like the spinning top, which has all the energy because it revolves in one direction. It doesn't do clockwise and anti-clockwise. That doesn't happen. And we are not in the moment. Stillness occurs when you are wholeheartedly present in whatever you're doing. We live in a world where everything is revolving and moving. The rock that you're on is revolving and moving. And in this cosmos is a universe in harmony. That's the term Pythagoras gave it. This universe or cosmos is in harmony. And NASA spacecraft have detected a constant hum in the cosmos. There's vacuum there, sound cannot travel, but there is a hum, as if the universe is singing in rhythm. And the same cosmic melody is in our bodies, in stillness. What you hear in the universe as a hum sound, you hear inside yourself in stillness. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm going to tell you a story. The title of the story is "The Strawberry is Delicious." When I told the story to my granddaughter, she said, the story is silly or the story is very deep. Let's see what you find out, what you feel. There was a man who was walking in the forest. There was tigers there. One tiger chased this man. The man ran for his life. He reached a cliff and then he came down the cliff on a vine. The tiger chased him to the top of the cliff. There was a tiger on top of the cliff. He was hanging on the vine. So this man looked down. He saw another tiger. There was a tiger on the cliff. That was his past. There's a tiger below, which is his future. And then, as luck would have it, the vine started to loosen and was about to break. He was about to slide down. At that moment, there was a pause. His mind took a pause. He looked beyond the two tigers, the one of past and one of present. He paid full attention to the present. He noticed some strawberries in front of him. took the strawberry and ate it. He relished the strawberry. That moment had his full attention. There was no tiger. He was beyond the tiger. And surprisingly, that moment elongated. It seemed to not end. It became longer and longer. He was enjoying the strawberry. The rope was about to break. The strawberry felt very delicious. What is the moral of my story? Every moment in life is precious, even the last moment. All you have is a moment. Life is a moment. Stillness is a moment. You must give full attention to that moment. If you don't pay attention to that moment, your life is actually running by. And when you are in the moment, when you are in stillness, life offers you strawberries, which you don't notice when you're in the past or in the future. If you're in the present, there are a lot of strawberries life offers you. Thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. After such a beautiful presentation, I find that the moderator's role is kind of redundant. So the only thing I feel like sharing is the sense of silence, which I experienced during the process of listening to the talk. Because at the end of it, many of the noises in my mind also kind of stilled. And at the end of it, I find that I don't have anything else to say except communicate the sense of profundity of whatever has been communicated by Ricky sir. So I will request members to share their thoughts, experiences, or questions with Ricky sir now.
Sir, I would like to ask a question. First, I want to say why I'm asking this question. I read a study that said if you are stuck in a freeway in a public transport, you are more stressed than a pilot on a fighter jet because you lose the sense of control. Because when you're stuck in traffic, you can't do anything. But as a pilot or a driver of a car, you can do something. You lose the sense of control. And as Professor Chima said in the last lecture, that we should be moving more towards collectivism. Do you think we'll be losing more control if we go towards from individualism to collectivism? And isn't that more stressful as individual for us?
Oh, I agree with Anil. We need to go towards collectivism because the truth is we're all connected. We are all a part of the same thing. So we'll have more control. For instance, in COVID times, we have realized that we are all together. If one man does something different, it affects everybody else. We've also figured out that when you have a thought, that actually has an effect on somebody else somewhere far away, because we are all kind of connected. So you have better control when you're connected than when you're in isolation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ankur, can you read out the question from Gokulji?
Sure, sir. So Gokul wants to say, you mentioned about Hakum. Where is the balance between grit and perseverance and going with flow?
Very good question. Wonderful question. And that's what we do. We work hard. But when you are with the hukam, you work smart. The nature helps you. You still work hard, but you get more success.
Thank you very much, sir. Tanushree, would you like to share some observations, thoughts?
For me, it was a wonderful session, and the silence as a rhythm itself is a very intriguing question per se, but it was really very well presented, and I simply liked it, and there was a lot to learn from it, and that's what is my takeaway for the talk today.
Did you find the story silly or deep?
Excellent.
I'll tell my granddaughter.
Thank you very much, Tanushree. Because it's a talk which deals with a profound sense of spiritual connect, I will just request Sandhuda to share a few observations or queries, and with that we can close the session.
And where is my mentor, Professor Mandal? He may have something.
Yes, Professor Mandal is very much here. So I'll just try to find out. He was connected, and I think after Sandhuda's observations, we will request Manasda to share his observations. We didn't ask him because we felt that he was a part of the team. That's why we didn't ask. Thank you.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, sir.
Sandhuji.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful talk. I felt like I was listening to Buddha himself when you talked about the story of strawberries. I remembered that a very rich guy who lived his life filled with all the glories that a rich person could live with, didn't find peace, didn't find that stillness. And he wanted to kill himself, jumping over the cliff. And Buddha was standing there with his group of friends. So he holds him and he says, "Who are you to hold me? Let me go. It's my life." And then Buddha says, "It's not your life. Your life first, belongs to your parents." And he explains a bit. In a little while, he realizes how beautiful was the surrounding that he was going to jump into. The valley, the rivers, the forest. Everything was so beautiful, so peaceful. And he says, "Wow, so beautiful, so peaceful." And then Buddha asks, "When you were about to jump, did you see that?" And of course he didn't, because he was living in that, stress. And so this is the truth, sir, that we always are running for something and we're never present in ourselves, in the moment, in the present moment that's given to us by the universe. We never think, "I'm breathing in, I'm alive." We are always chasing for something which we think will bring us happiness. And we are always wrong in that. And thank you for this, bringing back this to all of us here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sandhu. Thank you very much. We always have something to do. And after I finish this work, I will then look at all this. So there is always something to do.
Right.
Thank you very much, sir. I find that Professor Mandal probably is not here at the moment. Maybe it's late at night and he might have left. So if Professor Mandal is there, I will request him to respond. Or else we will close this session.
We'll have Anil Chima close the sessions that we had. Come on, Anil.
Yes.
I'll simply say thank you to everyone here and the fruitful discussion. May it inspire many, many more rounds of discussion. And I hope someday I get to come there and travel and be in person with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Anilji. Thank you, Rekhi, sir. We formally close this session, wonderful session now. Thank you.
Thank you to Professor Chima. Thank you, Dr. Rekhi, for the excellent session. And thank you, Professor Patnaik, for moderating it. We formally now will be closing the session. Next up, we have two parallel contributory sessions, session 8A and 8B.